You're standing on a beach near Gansbaai, South Africa. The sand under your feet is cold and gray, and in front of you lies the body of a great white shark, more than 16 feet long, the most feared predator in the ocean. Something has torn it open. Something has reached inside and taken what it wanted, and the rest of the body has been left behind like it was nothing. Something is hunting the hunters. The great white shark, the animal that has ruled these waters for over 11 million years, has become the prey, and along an entire stretch of the South African coast, they have simply vanished, fleeing something they fear more than anything else alive in the sea. I want to tell you exactly how I fell into this, because it started with a single photograph that I could not stop looking at, and it ended with footage that made trained marine biologists go silent. By the end of this, I'll show you the drone recording from June of 2023 off Mossel Bay of a hunt that lasted under 2 minutes and rewrote everything we thought we knew about the food chain. This is not a legend. Every piece of it traces back to peer-reviewed studies and named scientists you can look up tonight. I remember the exact moment it grabbed me. I was sitting at my kitchen table late one night, coffee gone cold, scrolling through a marine research page, and I stopped on an image of a great white lying on the sand with a clean opening between its pectoral fins. My first thought was, no shark did that. My second thought was, then what on earth did? And I didn't sleep that night. I just kept staring, trying to understand what could open a great white, like it was unzipping a bag. So let me take you back to where it truly began, because the first sign of this wasn't a video or a study. It was a body on a beach, and then another, and then 3 more. It was early in 2017. The town of Gansbaai sits on the southern tip of South Africa, and for decades it called itself the Great White Shark Capital of the World. People flew in from every continent to climb into steel cages and drop into water thick with these animals. The local economy ran on it, and then, over just a handful of days that February, 5 great white sharks washed up dead along that coastline. Not old sharks, not sick sharks, powerful, healthy animals in their prime, some of them over 16 feet long, and every single one of them had the same wound. When the researchers examined the bodies, they found a tear between the pectoral fins, low on the underside, near where the animal is widest. The wound was clean, almost surgical, and when they opened the sharks up to see what had happened inside, they found the reason these giants had died. The livers were gone, removed, extracted through that single opening with a precision that did not look like feeding, it looked like harvesting. Now you have to understand what a shark's liver is. In a great white, it can weigh hundreds of pounds and take up as much as a quarter of the animal's entire body weight. It's soaked in an oil called squalene, and it is one of the richest sources of fat and energy in the entire ocean. Whatever killed these sharks knew exactly what it was after. It ignored the muscle, ignored the meat, and reached in for the one organ worth more than all the rest combined. The scientist who led the examination of those first bodies was a marine biologist named Alison Towner, working with the Dyer Island Conservation Trust. And I went looking for what she said in those early days because I wanted to know the moment a trained expert first realized she was looking at something she couldn't explain. What I found was a person describing wounds she had never seen in her career on an animal that is supposed to have no equal in these waters. She talked about the bite marks bruised across the sharks' bodies and about how the livers had been removed with what she could only describe as surgical accuracy, and that word stopped me cold. Surgical. Because think about what that implies. A surgeon knows where the organ is before the first cut. A surgeon doesn't tear randomly and hope whatever did this new shark anatomy. It knew where the liver sat, how to open the body to reach it, and how to slide it out without shredding everything around it. That is not hunger. That is technique. If that kind of thinking pulls at you, the gap between the official explanation and what the evidence is actually saying, then I want to mention something before we go further. I've spent a long time writing up the frameworks I use to chase these cases, and I put them into 3 books: First Threshold, Deep Signal, and Hidden Systems. They're available for $97 at lowstoragens.org. Link is in the description. They're not about sharks specifically. They're about how to read the signal underneath the noise in any case where the comfortable answer arrived a little too quickly. If that sounds useful to you, go check them out and come straight back, because what happens next is where this story gets genuinely unsettling. But a wound only tells you what happened. It doesn't tell you who. And that question, who, is the one that pulled me down the rest of this rabbit hole. Because to answer it, I had to meet two individuals the researchers had already started to notice. Two animals with a name. The killers had names because you could recognize them on sight. Off the South African coast, researchers had begun logging repeated sightings of two male orcas, two killer whales that were impossible to mistake for any others. Both of them had collapsed dorsal fins, one fin bent hard to the left, one bent hard to the right. So the scientists named them Port and Starboard after the left and right sides of a ship. Now, orcas passing through these waters was not new, but these two were different. And the more I read, the more that difference started to feel deliberate. Port and Starboard were showing up again and again in the exact places and at the exact times that dead sharks appeared on the beaches. And it wasn't only great whites. These two had also been linked to killings of another species entirely, the broadnose seven-gill shark, in a place called Mossel Bay. When researchers examined those seven-gill carcasses, they found the same signature. The body's opened, the liver's gone. I sat with that for a long time, because think about the odds. Two specific animals, recognizable to anyone, keep appearing at the scene, and every time they do, sharks die in the same impossibly precise way. In any human investigation, that's not a coincidence. That's a suspect. But here's what unsettled me even more. Orcas are the largest members of the dolphin family, and they are famous for being intelligent, but hunting great white sharks is not something anybody had documented as a pattern before. Great whites are not easy targets. They are fast, they are armored with muscle, and they have their own set of instincts honed over millions of years. For two orcas to specialize in killing them and to do it with a repeatable method meant they had learned something. And once something is learned, it can be taught. That thought is where the real fear starts, because a single strange event is just an event. But a technique that can spread is the beginning of a change in the entire ocean. So I dug into how exactly two orcas take down an animal as dangerous as a great white. And what I found is a strategy so clever it almost feels unfair. Orcas will work together to flip a shark upside down. When you turn a shark onto its back, it enters a state called tonic immobility. It goes limp. It essentially becomes paralyzed, unable to move or defend itself, held in a kind of trance. The orcas hold it there, and while it lies helpless, they open it and take the liver. They found the one weakness in the most perfect predator the ocean ever built, and they use it every single time. Now here's where I expected the story to end, with a neat answer. Two clever orcas, a clever trick, a few dead sharks, case closed. That's the version I wanted, honestly, because it was contained, it was small. But the beaches kept telling a different story, and the thing that happened next is the part that turned this from a curiosity into something that genuinely disturbed the scientists studying it. The great whites started to disappear, not die, disappear. Because here's what nobody expected. After Port and Starboard began hunting off Gansbaai, the living great whites, the ones that were never touched, simply left. In the days and weeks after an orca attack, the sharks would flee the entire area. Cage diving operators who had seen great whites nearly every day for years suddenly went out onto the water and found nothing. Empty ocean where the ocean's most famous predator used to gather in numbers. In 2022, Alison Towner and her colleagues published a study in the African Journal of Marine Science that put hard numbers to what everyone had been seeing. They analyzed years of data, sightings, tagging records, dive logs, and they showed a clear pattern. The presence of these orcas was driving great white sharks away from sites they had used for generations, and in some cases, the sharks stayed gone for weeks. In one striking period, after a particularly brutal stretch, Great whites essentially vanished from Gansbaai for an extended time, something that had simply never been recorded in that place before. Let me make sure that lands, because when I first read it, I underestimated it. We're talking about an apex predator, the animal at the very top of its food web, being scared out of its own home range by another predator. That is one of the very few documented cases in the ocean of one top predator displacing another on this scale. The great white, an animal with no natural rivals, an animal that has starred in our nightmares for 50 years, was behaving like a mouse that smelled a cat. It was running, and when a giant runs, it leaves a hole. As the great whites fled Gansbaai, researchers noticed other species moving into the space they left behind, changing the balance of everything in those waters. This is what scientists call an ecological cascade, where you pull one thread and the whole tapestry starts to shift. Remove the great white, even temporarily, and the animals it used to control begin to change their own behavior, and the effects ripple outward in ways nobody can fully predict. That is the moment I stopped thinking of this as a story about a few sharks. It became a story about the ocean itself being rearranged in real time by two animals with bent fins, and I had to know whether the boring explanation, the one I kept hoping for, could still hold up. So let me talk to you directly if you're the skeptic in the room, because I was that skeptic, and I want to walk you through the exact reasoning I used to talk myself out of all of this. If you're sitting there thinking there has to be a normal explanation, that people are seeing patterns that aren't really there, I understand. I built the same wall in my own head. So let me show you what happened when I tested it. My first explanation was overfishing. South Africa's waters have been hit hard by fishing pressure, and great whites are increasingly threatened worldwide. Maybe the sharks weren't fleeing anything. Maybe there were just fewer of them. And the timing with the orcas was a coincidence. I was forcing into a shape I liked. That was my favorite theory, because it required nothing strange at all, but it fell apart against the details. Overfishing is slow. It happens over years, a gradual thinning out. What the Gansbaai records showed was the opposite. The sharks were there in normal numbers, and then within hours or days of an orca sighting, they were gone, and then later they came back. You do not get a mass vanishing and return in a single week from overfishing. That's not a population decline. That's a flight response. Something was frightening them out, and then they were cautiously returning when the coast was clear. My second explanation was natural migration. Great whites move seasonally. Maybe they were just following prey or water temperature, and the orcas had nothing to do with it. This one held up longer for me. But the migration argument couldn't explain the bodies. Migration doesn't tear the livers out of 5 sharks in a week. Migration doesn't leave surgical wounds between the pectoral fins. And the flight events lined up not with the calendar or the seasons, but specifically with the confirmed presence of Port and Starboard. The sharks weren't leaving on a schedule. They were leaving whenever the orcas showed up. My third explanation was the one I clung to longest, and it's probably the one you're holding right now. Maybe the wounds were being caused by something else, and people were blaming orcas because orcas are dramatic and make a better story. Maybe it was another shark or scavengers or damage that happened after death. And I'll be honest with you, I wanted this to be true because it kept the great white on its throne. Here's where it broke for me completely. Scavenger damage is messy and random. It doesn't consistently target one specific organ across many different animals. The precision was the thing that could not be explained away. Every affected shark opened in the same place, missing the same organ, the liver, the richest prize in the body. And the tooth impressions and bruising the researchers documented matched a large marine mammal, not another fish. When you line up the wound signature, the eyewitness sightings, the flight response, and the known hunting behavior of orcas that flip sharks and extract organs, every single arrow points the same direction. I tried to break it from 4 angles. It didn't break. That's when I stopped fighting it. And that surrender led me to the question that mattered most, the one that Alison Towner herself raised and that keeps me up even now. If this behavior is new, where did it come from? And is it spreading? Because for a long time, this was the part that got quietly waved away, and it's the part that started to make me angry. When those first reports came out, plenty of people did not want to believe that orcas were systematically hunting great whites. It was easier to call it a freak occurrence, a pair of odd animals doing something odd, nothing to worry about. And I understand the instinct, because a freak occurrence doesn't demand that you rewrite the textbooks. A freak occurrence lets everyone go back to sleep. But the evidence kept refusing to stay in that box, because Port and Starboard were not staying in one place, and they were not the only orcas learning the trick. Researchers began tracking these two moving along vast stretches of the South African coast, and the liver-stripped carcasses followed them like a trail. And that raised the possibility that scientists find genuinely alarming when they say it out loud. Orcas are social. They learn from one another. Mothers teach calves. Pods share techniques. If Port and Starboard perfected a method for killing the ocean's most powerful shark, there is nothing stopping that knowledge from passing to other orcas and then to others after them. I kept asking myself why more people weren't sounding the alarm about that, and the answer I kept coming back to is uncomfortable. It's not that anyone was hiding it, it's that a slow-moving change in the deep ocean is easy to look away from. The sharks that fled did it quietly, the bodies washed up in a remote stretch of coast far from most people's eyes. And admitting that the great white can be reduced to prey means admitting that our entire mental map of the ocean, with the great white at the summit, is wrong. That's a hard thing for anyone to say, so for years the safest move was to treat it as an isolated curiosity and hope it stayed that way. It did not stay that way. And to show you why, I have to take you to the single piece of evidence that ended my search. The thing I promised you at the very beginning. Because everything up to this point, the bodies, the sightings, the flight response, all of it depended on piecing together clues after the fact. Nobody had actually watched it happen from start to finish. Nobody had the whole hunt on record. And that missing piece was the one thing skeptics could still hold on to until a day in June of 2023 off a stretch of coast near Mossel Bay. On the 18th of June, 2023, observers on a boat and a drone camera in the sky captured what no one had ever documented before. And the detail that makes it extraordinary, the detail that made marine biologists sit up, is not just that they filmed the hunt, it's who did the hunting. Because it wasn't Port and Starboard working together as a pair, it was a single orca, one animal, alone. And the researchers recognized him. It was Starboard. What the footage shows is almost hard to believe even when you know it's real. Starboard approaches a great white shark that is roughly 8 feet long. There is no pack. There is no coordinated team flipping the shark between multiple attackers. There is one killer whale. And in a span of about 2 minutes, Starboard subdues that shark, tears it open, and extracts the liver, working alone, then swims off with the organ visibly in his mouth. Around the same window of time, a second great white carcass turned up nearby, missing its liver in the exact same way. 2 minutes. One orca, the most feared predator in the sea, dismantled by a lone hunter faster than it takes to boil an egg. This was documented and later published in a study in the African Journal of Marine Science, with Alison Towner again among the researchers describing it. And when I read their account of that solo hunt, I finally understood why this case had haunted me from that first photograph at my kitchen table. Every earlier explanation had leaned on the idea that killing a great white required teamwork, that it took two specialized animals doing something rare and hard. That was the last comfort left. As long as it took a pair, the behavior was limited. It couldn't easily spread. The solo hunt destroyed that comfort. If one orca can now kill a great white by himself in 2 minutes, then the technique has moved past the experimental stage. It has been refined into something efficient, repeatable, and terrifyingly easy for the animal performing it. It means the skill is no longer fragile, it's mature. And a mature skill in a social teaching species is exactly the kind of thing that spreads through a population and doesn't stop. That is the buried truth at the center of all of this, and it was never really hidden in a vault. It was hiding in plain sight in study after study that the wider world mostly scrolled past. The great white shark, the animal we made into the ultimate symbol of ocean terror, the creature at the very top of the food chain in our imagination, is not at the top anymore. It runs. It flees entire coastlines, and it can be opened up and emptied out by a single animal that has simply learned where the treasure is kept, and the ocean is quietly reorganizing itself around that fact right now, whether we choose to watch or not. Where the great whites fled Gansbaai, other predators moved in. As those predators shifted, the animals below them shifted too. Pull the apex predator off its throne even for a season, and the ripples run all the way down to the smallest creatures in the chain. We are watching, in real time, what happens when the king is dethroned. And the honest answer from the scientists is that nobody knows exactly where it ends. I went into this wanting the small, boring answer. 2 odd whales, a strange coincidence, nothing to see. I came out the other side understanding that I had been looking at the beginning of something. A learned behavior, born in 2 animals with bent fins, spreading along a coast and rewriting the rules of the sea, one liver-stripped body at a time. The footage from that June morning didn't close the case for me. It opened a much bigger door, because if this is what a single orca can do today, the real question is what an entire generation of them will be doing 10 years from now. So here's what I keep coming back to, sitting here long after the coffee's gone cold again. We spent 50 years afraid of the wrong thing. We built the great white into a monster, and all along there was something in the water that the monster itself was afraid of. And it took bodies on a beach and a 2-minute video to make us see it. If you're the kind of person who feels that itch when the official story is a little too tidy, the kind who would rather chase an uncomfortable truth than accept a comfortable guess, then you already know why I couldn't let this one go. You would have stared at that first photograph exactly the way I did. Now I want to hear from you. When you picture that solo hunt off Mossel Bay, one orca named Starboard opening a great white in under 2 minutes, do you think this behavior stays with a handful of animals, or do you think it spreads until great whites abandon whole oceans? Tell me in the comments, and tell me where in the world you're watching from, because I read every one of these, and the best leads I get come from you. Some of you know things about the sea that I don't, and I want them. And if you found your way here because you refused to close a case just because everyone else did, then stay with me. This is where we gather. The people who keep pulling the thread after the experts have walked away, because the next mystery I'm chasing involves a sound recorded in the deepest part of the Pacific, a rhythmic pattern that no known animal should be able to make, picked up by an instrument that was never supposed to hear anything down there at all. I found who recorded it, and I found what they said when they realized it repeated. But that's a descent for another night. I hope you stayed to the very end, because there's more than one video could hold. I'm inviting you into the Unexplained Society, where I take you through the full investigation right where we left off. Ask me your own questions, and a real person, me, answers you myself. Thousands of mystery lovers like you are already here. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. And you can cancel anytime. Now, if that surprised you, wait until you see what's happening in Florida. There's a new predator swallowing pythons whole, and the footage will leave you speechless. That video is starting right here. Stay with me.